I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of something thumping hard onto the floorboards. I sighed. That was the 3rd time this week. Normally it doesn't happen this often. I groaned and I pulled myself out of bed, wondering if I'd made the right choice. I pushed the thought out of my head pretty quickly, though. It doesn't matter if I did the right thing or not, because there's nothing to do about it now. When I offered to sell my soul to the devil, I was almost offended when he rejected it. "I don't do souls anymore," he said, waving his hand. "Since most of you will end up in hell anyway, I don't get anything worthwhile. There's nothing in it for me." "There must be something you'll take," I pleaded. I was truly desperate. I stared at the blood I'd spilled, listened as the voice poured from it like steam. "They say the only way to summon Satan is by killing something you love." I really hoped my daughter wouldn't miss our cat too much. "Why haven't you asked your God for help?" I could hear the sneer in his voice. "God hasn't answered my prayers. I can't afford to wait anymore. I'm running out of time." I wasn't ashamed that I'd turned away from God. Everyone always says that God has a plan, especially when a horrible tragedy occurs. Well, this was one plan that wasn't going to happen. Not if I had anything to do with it. The voice fell silent for a moment. The blood continued to bubble on the floor. I knew that if I touched it, I would scald my hand. But it was hard not to reach out, to plead my case through touch. "There is something that I want." Relief flooded through me. "Anything," I said, "anything." And that, of course, was the trouble. When he told me what he wanted, I was shocked and confused. And of course, afraid that he was going to renege on our deal. "I am not the trickster you think I am," he said. "I will give you what you most desire. In exchange, you'll do this for me. Again, and again, and again. Whenever I ask it of you. If you fail me, our deal is up. If you cooperate, then so will I. This arrangement is to our mutual benefit. I have no reason to double-cross you." That was true. But it still didn't sit right with me. I mused on that as I passed my daughter's door on the way downstairs. "Daddy?" The realization that her door was cracked open and my daughter was staring at me jolted me out of my recollections. She was rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Daddy, I heard something." I smiled at her and lifted her into my arms. She was so tiny, only 7 years old, and so precious. Her hair was a wild tangle on her head, and her Tweety bird nightgown was in tatters. She'd worn it so often, but she loved it so much that she'd never let me buy her a new one. I held her close to me, just to reassure myself that she was still there. "I heard it too. Don't worry, little birdie. Daddy will take care of it. You go back to sleep." Her head had already drooped down on my shoulder. I carried her back to bed and tucked her in, placing her favorite stuffed rabbit in her arms. She cuddled it reflexively and looked up at me, on the verge of falling back asleep. "I love you, Daddy." My heart swelled. I bent down and gave her a kiss on her forehead. "I love you too, sweetheart. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you and I will spend the whole day together. How would you like that?" She didn't give me an answer. She'd already fallen fast asleep. I patted her head and walked out of the room, closing her door softly. Yes, I'd made the right decision. I walked downstairs and covered my nose. God, I always forget how badly it stinks. You think you'll get used to it, but you never do. I know what death smells like. When I was a child, I used to play in the woods behind our house, and one day I passed this pit. It was at least 4 feet across. I'm not sure how deep it was because it was filled almost to the brim with rotting animal carcasses. I'll never forget the way that smelled. It took days to get the stench out of my clothes. The stench of death can't compare to what I was smelling right then. I suppose it's because these things have never actually been alive, I looked at the thing on my living room floor. Its hide was caked with pus. It wasn't very big, only about 4 feet tall if I had to guess. Its leathery wings were crumpled and tiny bones were sticking out through the flesh. I winced. That had to hurt. It had no arms, but it did have a pair of stick-thin legs. I didn't imagine they were very useful. Its thigh bone was twice as long as its shin, and its leg bent backwards, the opposite of a human's. It looked like an overgrown perversion of a bird, a sick one at that, if its face was any indication. It had a skull, kind of like a bird's too, beak and all, except the beak, of course, was covered with more skin, red and irritated as though it was infected. Its eyes were swollen shut and leaking blood. Something was oozing out of its mouth. I grimaced and headed for the kitchen to get a pair of latex gloves. I didn't want to get infected by whatever diseases that thing was carrying, even if I wasn't sure it was possible for me to get sick from it. Once I was properly prepared, I wrapped the body in a tarp and dragged it out the back door. By now, this sort of thing has become routine, and it goes fairly quickly. It helps, of course, that we don't have neighbors. Our quiet house in the country has done wonders for my side business. I grabbed the hatchet from the shed and doused it with holy water. Otherwise, it's like trying to chop into a steel wall. I got to work dismembering the body. Each time I hit it with my hatchet, the flesh would shriek. Not the entity, mind you. That thing is long dead. But whatever it's made of doesn't react well to the holy water, which isn't really surprising. It took me about 20 minutes to chop it into small enough pieces. Then I built the fire. I built a fire pit especially for this purpose. My daughter helped me. She liked laying the brick. Our progress was slow, but I cherished every second of it. As soon as the fire was hot enough, I started to feed pieces of the body into its depths. The pieces would jerk and hiss, but they succumbed to the flames quickly enough. The first time I did this, I threw up out of disgust. By now, though, it had become commonplace. It's funny. These things are built to resist the fires of hell. But hellfire is markedly different than what burns in our world. It's rather convenient for me. It makes the disposal much, much easier. As I fed its body to the fire piece by piece, my mind drifted back once again to that fateful day. The day I refused to regret. "We don't have any more room in hell for all the bodies," Satan told me. Bodies? Not human bodies, of course. Humans can't die in hell. That's part of its charm. I could almost hear the smile in Satan's voice, one of fondness and a hint of exasperation. Then it was back to business. Demons, on the other hand, can. Mindless little creatures that they are. Sometimes they simply expire, having run out their natural lifespan. Sometimes they kill each other. Sometimes a particularly ambitious human will kill one of them. It's almost impossible to destroy the bodies in hell, so they are dumped at the edge of the 12th circle. The 12th? I thought there were 9. He didn't deign to address that point. But centuries of dead demons have put a serious strain on our environment. The easiest place to get rid of them is the human realm. You must become their destroyer. I considered this for a moment. The horrors I would see, the ongoing slavery that would plague me for the rest of my days. And then I thought about her. And if I do this, if I agree to this madness, you will cure her. Immediately the voice answered, "Your daughter will become well again. She will never see the inside of another hospital as long as she lives." And that was good enough for me. I had to take the deal. You understand, don't you? A parent must do whatever they can for their child. And I couldn't watch the cancer eat away at my little girl anymore. She was only 5 years old at the time. How do you tell a 5-year-old that they're going to die? The doctors had told me that there was no hope. She only had a few weeks left at best. I watched her grow more and more tired every day. I saw her eyes growing listless, and the day that she asked me if dying would hurt, that was the day I decided to do the unforgivable. I fed the last piece of demon flesh into the fire. 10 minutes later, I extinguished it. All that was left now were ashes and bones, which I swept into a small wooden box. I'd built them myself. Another father-daughter project. My daughter is going to be very handy when she grows up, I can already tell. And thanks to me, she will grow up. I buried the box in the woods. I don't think the pieces are dangerous, but I can't be sure. Anyway, hopefully nobody goes looking for them. But if they do, it's not my problem. As long as my little girl is safe and happy, I couldn't care less what happens to the rest of the world. I guess that makes me a bad person. I returned to the house at 4 in the morning. I'm getting faster now. I went to my study and pulled out a journal, leather-bound and padlocked. I keep the key on a chain around my neck at all times. Wouldn't want my little girl to go snooping and see something that would give her nightmares. I catalogued the body in great detail. I drew it to the best of my abilities, described its structure and size, and wrote out my intuitions about how it tortured people. That's what demons do, right? I'll need this information one day. I know that I'll be in hell myself. That's what happens to people who make deals with the devil. But I don't mind, because when I die, my daughter will take over the family business. I'll teach her well, so that she can live, so that my death doesn't inadvertently cause hers as well. And then, once I'm dead and gone, I will kill each and every one of those fuckers. I will murder every demon that I can get my hands on. I will fight my way through hell, climb out of its sulphurous pit, and drag my way to heaven, where I will slay the greatest demon of all time, the one that betrayed me and left my daughter to suffer and die. My name is Simon. I am Hell's Mortician, and I am going to kill God.